Welcome to the Conquer Risk Podcast. My name is Manish Kata, and with me I have Jeff Goodnow. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing fantastic. There is sunshine outdoors, and I'm getting some light in here, and it's finally frickin' warming up. So I'm a happy camper.
Well, for the listeners or viewers, Jeff's in Texas, so he's been dealing with snowstorms and whatnot, and whatever the hell's going on out there. So glad
Yeah,
everything's working out with you.
yeah,
Listen, this is what we call our hot takes episode, where once a month, give or take, we will just talk about different industry trends we're seeing, things that hit the news, and just a quick discussion, things that you and I would probably talk about anyway on our regular calls. And so the first thing that came up was an interesting story because this firm is actually in my backyard, used to be at least, and I recall some of the people there with Facet Wealth. And Facet, well, it was an interesting story. I think it was 2016 where they launched, or 18. I'm not exactly sure. And their initial sales pitch was they would go out to RIAs and say, we will buy your smaller clients. So if you're an RIA with 100 million, but you have a bunch of small clients that are inefficient and dragging you down, that was the sales pitch at least, they would buy it. From what I read, it was 1 times revenue or whatever. Take it off your hands and put it into their machine in terms of flat rate pricing, financial planning, etc. And that was the initial growth or angle of this company, and they've had some really explosive growth recently. What are your thoughts on Facet, and what do you know about them?
yeah. I didn't know a lot until I saw this article, but it struck a little bit of a chord for me because in some of the things I've done in the past, this really it struck me from a flat rate pricing standpoint. That's something that I remember back, and it was probably 2007, 2008. I don't have the article anymore, but like the state of Utah came out with this whole big piece of like 6 different iterations of flat rate pricing in the RIA world, and they said it's a no-go, just not going to happen. Now that was flat rate pricing on asset management, right? But we've always been able to charge a financial planning fee. I mean, that's been something that's been around for a long time. And I think my take on this is that it's interesting that now a firm is trying to just go after this for the smaller clients, because based on their ADV, the clients have a fair amount of money. I mean, they're up to $500 million, which is not too shabby for having 2,400 clients or whatever. I mean, it is what it is, but they're obviously grabbing the assets as well as just doing financial planning.
Yeah, flat rate pricing is interesting, and we'll get into a couple points about their growth and their firm. But I think people, even though it's flat rate, I think you still start with a basis points charge and work your way backwards. Because the problem is, if you have a flat rate, if you charge $2,500 on $50,000 account, you start creeping into, well, I mean, that's 5%, so it's like you still have to start with a reasonable basis point charge and work your way back. You can't just say it's flat rate for everyone. And where are the controls there that someone's not getting, ridiculously charged on a flat rate scenario?
Right. Well, one of the other things that struck me was the fact that when you say, well, their goal is to go, or their process is not the goal, the process is to go buy the smaller clients. Well, typically smaller clients
Hold
aren't
on,
as
hang on a second. I don't know. I actually reached out to the reporter that wrote the article. So, by the way, Mike Thrasher, RA Intel, wrote the
Yes.
write-up on Facet. I reached out to him and said, hey, are they still buying smaller clients? Because I haven't heard, that news story made no mention of it. And so, sorry to interrupt, but the point is,
Yeah.
I'm not even sure they're doing that anymore.
Well, I think I would agree with you, and part of that reasoning is number one, the smaller clients of a larger book typically just aren't engaged as much. And number two, the smaller clients, in my experience, are typically less likely to have the funds to be able to go spend $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 on a financial plan, right? They're maybe they only have 50 or 80 or $100,000 of investable assets anyway, and so to come up with a $2,500 check is kind of a big deal. So
Well, I think it was 600
that's
600 to 15,000. So maybe those clients are getting
okay.
the
Okay, and
lesser
this is
fees.
but this is exactly why I think you're right as far as their target audience, because their ADV says 1,200 to 15,000. So the
Yeah.
600 that's referenced, I mean, their ADV says 1,200. I mean,
Yeah.
they could choose to do lower, I suppose. But anyway, that's kind of my point. Is
Well,
that
look,
they're go
let's
ahead.
with Facet. Let's talk about a couple things here. So it's a VC backed firm. I think
Yes.
you did some research where it ended
Yeah.
up being 62 million they've taken in. So, when you take in that kind of money, you're no longer really an RIA. You're a VC backed RIA, which means a couple things, right? You have to scale really fast. You're hiring really fast. You're trying to focus more on user count than anything else. Nothing wrong with that, but the incentives are aligned with VC, not necessarily the client.
Yeah, that's a big deal for me. And I guess the process is, I'm going to make an analogy here, right? The robo was supposed to commoditize what advisors were doing, right? It was supposed to just simplify this deal or whatever, and that became a commodity. Third part, or management itself was just a commodity. Well, here's what I don't like about this. It's really taking, and I think it's because of the VC backing, it's really taking the clients themselves, and they are the commodity. Now, you can talk about offering great service, and hey, maybe they do. Facet, do your thing, man. Maybe you're cranking it and providing white glove service. But when the process itself is you have to scale and you have to get a whole bunch of people in as clients and you have to hire a whole bunch of people to take care of those clients, and it's all about the scale, the client is just a widget. They are just a commodity. And that's the reason I don't particularly care for this sort of
Well,
striking
aside
party.
from that, I think this is my takeaway actually, and it's completely different than yours.
It's okay.
I think that this is a lesson for advisors because they are actually going to do numbers that are compared to the larger robos. And the lesson for advisors is we live in such a great time for anyone to go out there and market. And advisors, I talk to advisors all the time, are like, hey, what should I do? What should I do? I said, do you believe in your process? Do you believe in your product? Do you believe in yourself? If the answer is yes to all of them, go borrow money, get an SBA loan, go to your checking account and put it into marketing because there's proof of concepts across our industry of being able to throw money at marketing and grow. And if that's your goal, this is like the greatest time ever to do it. And that's what I took away from this. I mean, they have a marketing machine. They're throwing money at it. They're throwing employees at it, and it's working. And so, forget about the model. Advisors get caught up too much in hourly and flat and AUM. Whatever your model is, if you want to grow, you have to put the money into marketing. So anyway, that was my take on it.
That's funny. I want to add because I spoke to an advisor early this morning, and it was funny because he's the first one to really sort of say this out loud, and he laughed because he's like, well, most advisors say 82% of their business comes from referrals, and he said what that tells me is they don't do any marketing, period. Right? They're dead in the water in that space. So if they're really just trying to replace the 4 or 5 clients that die or leave, and they can get those with referrals. So fine. Well, your case is absolutely spot on in that there is a process. Marketing can work, right? PR can work. Those sorts of things that they can drive that engine to. If you want to grow, there is a phenomenal opportunity to grow. I'm 100% behind that statement.
Yep. All right, well, moving on. Cetera buying Voya. Quick story, and then we'll dive into why this is at least important to us. In 2017, Cetera, we had a direct agreement with them because they purchased a handful of broker-dealers that we worked with. They terminated our direct agreement because they wanted all the reps to go to platform. We hated that. We hated them, and we hated that decision, and we were wrong. So in hindsight, we were absolutely wrong because, frankly, as we've grown ourselves as business owners, we come to the realization that it's actually better and easier for an advisor to be on a platform, easily switch out money managers, work with one paperwork experience, and not have to constantly have these direct agreements. And they weren't the only one that did this to us, LPL, a couple other places. And we were angry and bitter at the time because it really rocked our business. But in hindsight, they were right. And, if I can meet the person that made that decision, I would shake his hand and say, you know what, you were right. I said a lot of bad things under my breath about you, but ultimately you were right. and
Wait, those
Cetera.
were under your breath? Why did I hear them?
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, to you about them. So, but we listen. You got to admit when you're wrong, and they're we've worked with them closely over the years. A ton of advisors work with us through Cetera, and I think they have nailed the My Advice Architect platform business. It's efficient, it's well run, and I think adding these Voya reps is just going to be beneficial to not only Cetera but also to the Voya advisors. They're gonna really get tied into a machine that's well oiled at this point.
Now I'm gonna have to do something fun here, and this is specifically for Christopher because I'm gonna give Cetera a round of applause here. This is a little trick that my wife taught me years ago. I no, totally agree. I want to give Cetera a round of applause because that was probably the biggest impetus. The word we like to use in our business, you and I talk about, is pivot, right? And for years, the discussion was, well, what about TAMPs? What about that distribution channel? And we ignored it. And I've admitted I'm 180 degrees from where I was before, right? I used to teach advisors go direct to your different managers and so forth. And now the world has changed, and I think it's the opposite. I think most advisors will do better, will grow better, will provide better service if they are associated with the service provider, the TAMP, providing the different strategists that they can choose from. And Cetera rocking our world like that with a fair amount of assets that we had to figure out what we were going to do with, helped to open our eyes a little bit and say, okay, wait a second, do we need to rethink our process? And it's obviously been pretty successful. We love helping the Foresters folks. Hopefully now hear some of the Voya folks, the different groups within the Cetera organization. We've got First Allied and the different Cetera broker dealers. So pretty exciting
All right,
stuff.
well, next thing that came up actually. I think you and I should talk about this in a full-blown podcast, but for now, let's just kind of intro it. It's come up a lot recently, and I knew nothing about this whatsoever prior to 2 weeks ago. Even on that first call, we have one of our top advisors who want to use this, and we all started doing a little bit of research, and it's donor-advised funds. And typically, I think Jen asked me, like, what do you know about this? I'm like, nothing. We've never had one. We don't know how to manage it. I have not the slightest idea. But it's come up so much, and so you took the lead on this. What was in the news recently with the growth of these things?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there was an article that came out about Fidelity and Schwab, and that's great. Ironically, we also deal with TDA, and so we'll talk about that in a second. But here's a couple of little quick stats. So I'm going to read these to make sure I get them right. In this article, Fidelity said donors made 2 million grants totaling $9.1 billion to 170,000 charities. That was a 24% increase, over 2019. Schwab was similar, right? And donors gave 830,000 grants totaling $3.7 billion to nearly 100,000 charities. So that's a 35% increase. So you really think about this. Both organizations, unrelated, had a 30+% increase in the amount of donations in this space. That's pretty crazy. Wait,
hang on. Can you back up a second? I want to ask you a question. Talk to me like I'm a 12-year-old who understands none of this. What is a donor-advised fund?
Yeah, so basically there are several ways that you can give to a charity. Funny enough, I just last night was part of a webinar where they said something like 82% of donations are still done by paper check. Okay.
It's paper check.
Sorry,
go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So think about this for a second. If you write a paper check, now you've got to go, maybe you can write it off on your taxes if you can itemize. But there are better options if you're talking about a sizable donation. So a donor-advised fund is essentially an irrevocable trust that you put the money in. It could be cash, right? But could also be, let's say you've had Apple for the last 20 years, and it's in a non-qualified account. Well, you could donate a certain amount of Apple stock to this donor-advised fund. Suddenly they get essentially, if they want to sell it, whatever, right? You could have it's the money. That's all they're really needing is the money. But you don't have to pay the appreciation for selling Apple stock to give them the money. You can just give them that highly appreciated stock and save yourself the taxation on the difference. Now, there's another step to this, and this is where it gets a little bit exciting. So I think it's a good time to say there are options that will allow the donor to still manage the assets. And that's where this is pretty interesting for advisors, because not only are you helping on a very clear tax benefit, but you're also helping just from the standpoint of, hey, there's some dollars there. The advisor obviously has the ability maybe to be compensated, but importantly, if you can manage that, then even that money can continue to grow. And so it's a pretty cool setup. And the higher you go up the wealth spectrum, the more donor advised funds are used. So I think donor advised funds is kind of a bad call.
You got to have some serious money to donate stock, So these are some affluent people that are doing this.
Well, yes and no. So we've got one access point where I've seen it as low as $10,000. Now, frankly, I'll be honest with you, $20,000 I don't think is probably worth it in most circumstances. But look, there's a lot of people that maybe work for. I'll just pick on a couple. Let's say Texas Instruments or IBM or Apple that have a lot of stock appreciated. That they don't have to necessarily be super wealthy, but again, they're sort of stuck, and if they want to sell it, they've got to pay this, the capital gains.
That's true, yeah.
So
the
why not?
Gains, for sure.
I know we had a boon in our past where Kim and I had a good opportunity to have some excess funds, and we wanted to take part of that, situation and do a large donation. And so it would have been nice, frankly, to have known that, to have been able at that time to use something like this and do so rather than just simply cutting a check. And that's the difference, right? So go ahead.
So we found a company, I guess you found a company called the American Endowment Foundation, AEF, that offers this service in conjunction with TD, and it allows advisors who are working with the Union UMA to offer donor advised funds, and then the money that's on the platform, obviously, we're able to manage with the multitude of strategists that we offer. Any quick thoughts on that? Don't ruin our next podcast, but any quick thoughts on that?
No, I'm not going to ruin the next podcast. I think this is the big eye-opener for me, because I'm the only one who was really familiar with donor-advised funds before, when this conversation came up a couple of weeks ago. And that was, my experiences had always been, you really had, you're talking about different entry points, $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, and then you basically do your donation, and what you get back is basically all those different donations pooled together, and that's just a bucket of stuff, and that's what you get to in doing your donation. I mean, it was kind of an awkward thing, and really meant for the high net worth kind of people. So the fact that this pares down to like I said, as low as 10 grand or 20 grand or whatever you want to do, that kind of thing, I think speaks volumes to technology moving forward, and just a better way to approach helping your clients in yet another way. You and I have always said it's not the money management that is sort of the golden ticket to help a client. It's the financial plan and that kind of process, that everything around that the advisor provides their most of their value, right? Yeah. Because a lot of people have access to the same strategists. So
we've gotten a ton of questions about this too. So I think it's important. And frankly, I don't think a lot of firms out there are addressing this. So we'll save the rest for the next podcast, and we'll dive into how functionally it works with AEF and TD and Potomac and all of that stuff. So let's save that for the next one, because I think it's important information to get out to advisors. All right, what do you got? Any recommendations in your world these days?
Yeah, I have to, I have to throw one out there, and I know you're going to laugh at me, but hey, it's RV world again, from the standpoint of my Grand Design RV. After going through the cold nuts apocalypse down here in Texas with everybody freaking out, double-digit negative wind chill. We always wondered, because we didn't want to be in the cold. That's the whole reason we were doing what we were doing. But I have to say, very, very pleased. I mean, with the way we've got this set up, we really had no problem. The rolling blackouts, all that stuff. Cold weather, not an issue. Just really happy. So, their service is top notch. What can I say? If you've got somebody, one of your clients is asking about RVs, and that's what they're wanting to do in retirement or whatever, there you go. You got something it's a value add. You got something to give them.
You didn't mention exactly what it is. What's the actual recommendation?
Well, so I have, so I have a Grand Design Momentum 397TH. So that is a toy hauler.
Okay.
They have several different, they have, fifth wheels, they have travel trailers, they have toy haulers. We have a toy hauler. So I have my own generator. We have this set up to basically boondock, which means you're not connected to anything. So in this perspective, when everybody else is freaking out, well, we weren't connected to water, we weren't connected to sewer, we weren't connected to the electric grid kept going down. Well, that's okay. We were ready. We had our own water, we had our own electricity, we had everything. So it really
Cool.
wasn't a big issue for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know a lot of folks are struggling in Texas, and shout out to douchebag Ted Cruz, who decided to fly to Cancun while his entire state is going through something.
And blame his kids.
I don't get political on this, but come on, man, like, whatever. Anyway, my recommendation this week is something called Misfits Market, and so apparently, when grocery stores stock their produce aisle, if there's something that disconfigured or looks crooked or whatever, they put it to the side because they want their produce to kind of look pretty. And so this Misfit Markets works with grocery stores and farms to package up and sell at a discount perfectly fine food that maybe looks a little different. And you can get these boxes once a week. And so we tried it out. You get these free codes and you get them mailed out. And it's actually fine. I mean, everything is perfectly fine. There's a good mix of different fruits and vegetables delivered to your door. And, I'm always suspect of these things. Like, just take your ass to the grocery store and go pick it out yourself, But it's awesome. And obviously with 4 kids and a busy life, to just have that stuff show up on your doorstep is cool. So I definitely recommend it. We're continuing to do it. And it's a good find.
Well, I guess the best thing I can say is I resemble that remark. I work just fine. I work just fine. I just look a little funny.
Yeah, right.
So,
Well, listen,
anyhow.
let's wrap this up here. Look, YouTube is blowing up. And listen,
Boom.
we went 2.5 years with videos having 3 views, which were probably me, you, and Christopher. And then every video was 3 views, 5 views, 7 views. And I'm like, what are we doing? And then all of a sudden it went from 500 to 800 to now 1,000, 1,500 views. So obviously people are going there. Thank you. Continue, subscribe, like, whatever the hell you do on YouTube. And reach out to us if you have any questions, that's for sure.